Wrecker. What's up?
Yeah, good to see you, man. I feel like I'm seeing you every day now, or every other day at least.
It's because we hung out together and watched Dortmund against Stuttgart in
Yes,
the
the
yellow
the very
wall.
famous Weizenbaum fellow Nick Berenne was actually visiting Germany with his son, which was awesome. And we went to a soccer game, which was your and my basically my first experience in a soccer stadium too. It's my second, but still, it was kind of
Wow.
cool.
I'll tell you what, those guys, they show up 2 hours before the game starts. They're singing.
They're
Then they
singing all
sing the
day long,
whole game.
and they
And then the
lose.
game's over and they lose and they're still there singing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The atmosphere is amazing. I mean, they said that before, but witnessing it in the stands, it's kind of special. I agree.
Yeah. All right. So, my brother, here, I want to tell you something. Stefan Seidel and I have this bet where whoever gets to eight, because way back a couple of years ago, we decided that citations, once you hit 8,000 citations, then you're a serious person. So
Why eight though? Why 8,000?
I have no
It's
idea
just a
why we came
number.
up
Okay.
with 8,000. I guess we looked at people and thought, yeah, that's the threshold. And then you know what I see right now on my Google Scholar? Here, Professor Dr. Jan Recker, Nucleus Professor of Information Systems. You have over 20,000 citations, dude. You're, I mean, that's a rock star by anybody's, right? 20,000, that's legit. You're a legit researcher.
Well, you tell me. Like, thank you. Yeah, I came across this, and I came across this as I was actually, I don't know why I was doing this, but I was actually looking up a friend and colleague of mine, Per Davidson, who's an entrepreneurship professor, and that I work with sometimes, and I still do. And he had 50,000 today.
Okay.
50,000. That's such an unbelievable number, right? So he's older,
Yeah.
sure. But he's not that old for that, for one thing. And
Yeah.
like, I would say him is totally legit. Because if you look at his top 10 papers, they're all like 1,000 citations each or more. I think his top paper is about dynamic capabilities or social capital and entrepreneurship, 7,000 citations. These are all legit papers. And in the middle of it, he has his really, really good book. He wrote this book on entrepreneurship as a research domain, which is like the textbook on getting started with entrepreneurship research. And this guy's
Right.
amazing, man. And I wrote him an email, actually. I wrote him an email saying, like, Per, man, this is just amazing. What accomplishment.
Yeah, that's a lot to say. And I actually got in a discussion recently with our associate dean of research here. And the big issue in business schools anyway, and I think a lot of places it's all about the journals, right? And we've
Yeah, of
talked
course.
about that on previous episodes where it's like there's your UT Dallas list, there's your basket, there's the old basket, the new basket, right? Then at
Yeah.
IS, we tend to talk about the big four, right? MIS,
Yeah.
QIS, JMIS, JAIS, right? So there are these lists and their reputation of the journal. And then what they do is they count journal hits. But then the problem is there are people who publish in top journals and none of their work is ever cited. Sometimes it's because of, the type of research they do. Certain types of research cite each other more than others, or they're just not making an impact or something like that. So the idea is that some people now, it's not just journal hits, it's you need a certain amount of citations too. And they're starting to look at citations more and more.
You think so? Because I was being asked this very question by, I can't remember, like doctoral students or postdoctoral students. They asked me, Jan, do you think that citations matter in my promotion, in my hiring package? And I think I replied with, I don't think they
No,
matter at this point, but I
no.
do think it'll matter at some stage and I'm agreeing with you, as the system of evaluation and merit is moving towards an article level metric, not a journal level metric, because we
Yeah.
can't we can approximate the quality of a paper by looking at the quality of the ranking and reputation of a journal, but it's not a solid proxy, of course, right? Shitty papers
Right.
end up at good journals, good papers end up at bad journals. So we need, at some stage, I think we'll move towards some article level metrics. And the one article level metric we do have at the moment are citations. So
Yeah.
I do think they'll come into play in the sense of, at the moment, it's tricky because let's say you have a couple of nice papers and then you have very good citation, you have good impact with those. That can work in your favor. But I also think at the moment it can work in your disfavor because let's face it, there's already a citation game going on where people
Mhm.
game, not necessarily the getting into the top journals, but certainly gaming the how do we get a lot of citations. And if you
Yeah.
happen to be caught in the wake of all this, I think that
Hmm.
can backfire on you. If you happen to be on a paper that has a lot of citations, but where people don't think that's legit. You mentioned the word legit, right? So, and I said,
Yeah.
Per, look at his papers. They're all legit. Like they attract a lot of citations because they did create an impact on scholarly work in the way that we
Yeah.
want it to be. But of
Yeah.
course, there's also papers that attract a lot of citations where people, I'd say, questioning or at least, doubtful about what that citation number really means. So it's a difficult metric. Like all
Yeah.
of these metrics, they have their pros and cons, I guess. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and and citations, I think it's one of those things where every citation is not equal. A lot of, especially, it's like the Matthew effect or whatever, the
The
virtuous
Matthew
cycle.
effect. Yeah, the star performer
Once
effect.
once someone cites your paper for something, then other people will cite it for the same thing, and then it like virtuous cycle. So there could be two AI papers at the same time. One hits a particular community. It might not be better. It just becomes the signal that that community uses for that particular topic. So
Okay, so let's
um,
decompose that a little bit. So I think there's a couple of different signals that citations give. We cite papers for different reasons, is what I'm saying, and I
mhm,
think there's different ways that papers attract citations. So maybe
mhm,
let's start with the first. I mean, the obvious one is I guess a substantive citation. What I mean with that is this: like I am actually building on an argument in a conversation that's going on. I'm acknowledging the source of the argument. This person did his research based on whatever assumption, and now I'm problematizing or challenging or working off that assumption. So, and then I cite that person, and that's a substantive one, right?
yeah.
And that's an obvious one, I guess.
Their findings were X, and I'm using those findings to help make my argument. Therefore,
Absolutely,
right.
right?
So,
And then there are, I guess, well, first of all, there are symbolic citations. And I guess that's what you meant. It's sort of like you want to signal that you acknowledge a particular, say, stream of research. And, we can't cite all of the papers. So we're picking, Per, my colleague that I just mentioned, he always says, like, pick big name and big journal. That's his citation guide. He said, always pick big name and big journal as a symbolic reference that you insert to say, like, look, there's also the stream of research that looks at, I don't know, social capital. So we're citing big name in big journal to acknowledge one of the papers that stands for the stream of research.
so that's not really substantive. That's more topical.
Or
I'm writing
symbolic,
a paper
yeah.
on Chat GPT, so I think that's different than symbolic, right? I think
Okay.
symbolic is something else. Uh, it's kind of, so this is, or maybe it's a different type of symbolic where you're not addressing the substance of the paper, but you're addressing the topic of the paper, and you're using a paper as like a placeholder for a topic. I am studying digital transformation, and there's a lot of research on this. I might grab Vile's paper. A lot of people
Yeah.
cite that
Gregory's, yeah.
for digital
Or,
transformation.
or managing AI special issue at the lead paper that we wrote. Do you think that's one of
Yeah.
them? Because it
I
gets
hope it's one of them, because they get tons of citations, those kind of topical ones. So if ours is about, it becomes the managing AI, and yeah, now we don't get a lot of substantive citations for that. I don't think. I think
no,
mostly
but
it's
we get a lot of citations, but I think a lot of them are topical. Like people talk about
yeah,
managing AI these days, and when they refer
yeah,
to top managing AI, they do refer a lot to our paper. So I don't think
yeah,
that's a substantive one, because I think if it were a substantive, they would take some of the ideas about autonomy and opacity and so forth, and the frontier idea, and they would work with that. And very few, some do, but most don't, right? And they still cite the paper.
yeah. And I guess the other type is more of it's another signaling or symbolic one where a paper stands for something. Right. So the famous one that my buddy Sean Hansen actually did a review on once was Lynn Marcus's 1983 paper, Power and
Power
Politics. And
politics.
right. So she was talking about system implementation. So it wasn't really the topic of her study, and maybe it was from a conceptual standpoint, but then it became the perfunctory citation if you use the word power, right?
Oh.
You kind of throw that out there
So
that
that's
says,
a
I mean,
symbolic one, right? Is that a symbolic
yeah,
one in a
yeah, I
way?
think so. And yeah, I think there are a lot of those. And then there are the self citations, right? Which people I think because it's the citation game. So there are ways to address your own work substantively, and then I think there are ways to just pack your paper with a bunch. As a matter of fact, this is what I heard. It's one of the bad things people do.
With
They
citations, yeah.
they cite themselves right in the body, and maybe it's not necessarily the argument, but they'll actually pack the back of their paper with their own citations, and don't reference them in the paper. And then these
What?
citations and the reviewers don't. I was reading about this that there are a bunch of different little tricks people do.
So
So you
wait, so it ends up in the references at the end of the paper, but it's not actually citation in the paper.
right, and then
Oh,
these
oh,
citation things like Google Scholar just go and see what the back of the paper cited,
yeah.
and they give you X number more citations, although it wasn't actually cited in the paper. So I heard that's one of the things, or I read that's one of the things people do. So there are all these ways to game citations, I think.
I think there's two more types of citations that come up. The fourth one next to topical, symbolic, and substantive, I guess, is methodological. Like some papers are
Oh yeah,
being cited for guidelines, like Kathy Urquhart's work on ground theory method.
yeah,
Supra wrote a very nice paper, I think, on the different genres of qualitative research, and I cite that a lot just to position. I'm saying like I'm doing type D, whatever. I'm doing this
well,
type
even
of
that
paper.
there's substantive and symbolic, right? There's the substantive, which is I followed this process. Then there's the symbolic too, which is, they throw in a couple of
I do
yins and
case
eyes and
study
hearts
in.
and
I do
yeah,
case
yeah,
study in.
exactly.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. And the fifth one I came across. So this is old stuff. So in 2008, my friend Marta and I. This was 4 years after Al Hefner's paper. Remember that? So Al Hefner
Hmm.
and Thuda and others, they wrote this design science paper, and it had this 7-step procedure.
2004, right?
Yeah, the
The big one.
seven-step procedural model for design science. And in 2008, we were PhD, no, well, just early postdocs. We had the idea of doing text analysis of all the papers that cited the Hefner paper, which were a couple of thousand already. We wanted to
Mhm.
see what how closely these 7 steps were followed. And our hypothesis is that everyone does step 1 and 3, but as you move towards the end, they do less and less, like especially evaluation and stuff like this. Anyway,
Yeah.
so we downloaded all the papers that cited, Hefner et al., which was, let's say, 1,000. I can't remember. I can look it up. And then we looked at it and we figured out that, even with that paper, which is a methodological paper, and people loved it and did design science and they were using this template, most of them were really topical or cursory or symbolic. Not
Mhm.
that many. So out of the 1,000 citations, we probably ended up with 200. And then we looked up how many of them followed, the steps. And we figured out that the citations to Hefner in many, many papers, not in many, but in several papers, ended up actually at the back end under the future research opportunities, sort of like the things or the limitations, like the things they haven't done but said they would do in the future. I don't know what you would want to call that citation, but sort of like we're not doing this, but one could also do this,
Yeah.
cite something.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. So I think I bet you, and not only that, but you did that 4 years after it was out.
Yeah,
Now
it
it
was a bit
takes a
early.
long time.
Yeah.
And really 4 years is nothing, right? So 4 years after something, it doesn't really have time to get into but I think the majority of papers are not cited substantively. Like look at our managing AI thing. I don't think that many people are reading it. We have some clever ideas in there. I don't know if people are doing that. They're just kind of
Yeah.
saying AI and then moving
Well,
on.
like I think there's an implicit ranking of the types of citation. I don't think it matters. I do think there's a good reason to provide topical and symbolic citations. The power and politics one. Very rarely do I work with that,
Mhm.
but I have cited it quite a few times, I think. As you said, as a topical or symbolic reference. Also, for
Mhm.
example, that's a symbolic reference also for a particular type of paper. They sort of deductive multiple cases, like a theory testing case study kind of paper. That's also why people cite it. So I
Yeah.
think that's completely fine.
I was going to give you another way people game citations, right? I gave you the one where they just pack the back with not just self-cite, but pack the back where they didn't even use it in the paper. Another one, and this, right? They put a bunch of people on a paper, sometimes some very well-known people, and then they hit a current trendy topic. And then if you have 20 well-known people just doing a very simple paper on a very
They
trendy
attract
topic,
citation, yeah. So this is the attracting
if it's
citation by
timely, yeah.
by affiliation with people that are in
Yeah.
high esteem, I guess. Yeah, I do think that's a citation gaming thing, to be honest. And I think I think personally, I think this is dangerous. So there are some people that are, willously and consciously and know this, understand this game very, very well, and they can make up their own mind whether they want to, participate in these efforts or be on these papers or not. So fine, like whatever, they can do this. I think there's quite a lot of people that are caught in the myth. Maybe
Hmm.
they don't know. Maybe they thought it would be a good idea. Maybe they were just looking for the next paper. There's a lot of valid reason why people get up in this. What I've seen is that now that it backfires on people. Because let's face it, some of these papers in some of the journals in which such papers appears, they get a bad rap. They are having a bad reputation. And we
Hmm.
see this on LinkedIn every now and then, etc. So people are talking about this and not necessarily, I think, in a positive light. And now
Right.
imagine you're one of the 40 authors and it didn't mean any harm, and you certainly didn't want a game. You didn't seek to win this game or whatever, and now you have this on your resume. Like I don't, and then it work. It can. I've seen it work against people that people said, "Well, this guy's 2,000 citations," but actually 15 or 100 of them are not legit. Thereby, people assume the other ones are also not legit. So I do
Oh,
think it's a little
wow.
bit dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, that would suck if you did good scholarship. Like, I don't have anything over 1,000 citations or anything like that. And what if I jumped on one of those papers and then immediately got 2,000 citations or something? My top paper I'm proud of my work that's up there, and my top paper would be something I'm not too proud of. That would kind of
That would
suck.
suck, right? Yeah, that would suck. I think.
And it's a continuum because if you think about it, now our managing AI was not peer reviewed in the traditional sense. It was reviewed by Andrew, Arun Rai, and some other folks gave us feedback, and then we revised it, right? But if you think about it, that was the front end to a special issue. We are editors of the journal, so it's almost an editorial. And now we're getting a bunch of citations. That's my top cited paper. Now, I think
Yeah,
there's scholarship in there. I
there is
think
scholarship in
it's
there. I think.
it's intellectually rigorous and it's a strong paper, I think, that stands on its own. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback, as I'm sure you have on our paper. But if you think about it, it's one could argue it's the same thing, couldn't they? Here they are, four editors at MIS Quarterly writing a paper together. It didn't go through the full peer review process. Now it's getting a lot of citations. One could point that out and point out to in another journal where they maybe attracted a bunch of senior people. They wrote on a topic and did it in a timely way, and it attracts a bunch of citations, right? There's no difference, is there? They're both pretty
I
much the
think there's
same
a
thing.
lot of difference. I think there's a
Okay.
lot of difference. First of all, this is the back end of like a 3-year process in which we, worked on the special issue. If you remember, the proposal for a special issue is being reviewed. You had to
Yeah.
submit it to Scholar One and whatever else. Second, even this one was reviewed. The only difference was it wasn't a double blind. It didn't happen through Scholar One. It was submitted to the EIC acted as a senior editor and he got a bunch of reviews. Now, frankly, they were very mild on us. As people, I think that's sort of like the norm. You are not being too strong. But I've been in other special issues in
For
the
special
European
issues. Yeah.
Journal and Strategic Entrepreneurship Journal. That's my latest one, where I just underwent a full blown peer review process, 3 rounds of revisions for the lead article. Yeah.
Hmm.
So similar process in the sense that you had to submit it to Scholar One. The EIC acted as the editor, and he got 2 other senior editors to act as the reviewers, 2 or 3, I can't remember. But it was really reviews, response to reviews, revisions, do it again, 3 rounds. This is for
Yeah.
the lead article. So so they are being reviewed just in a different mode. Second, they are at the back end of several years of work. We said at some stage we could have used the time to write an article, and the kind of like the deal is you work so much with all these teams working on their articles and learn so much about managing AI. And of course, we read and do a lot of other things. And we had some fierce debates in our author team as well, what the stories and the ideas and so forth. So it's kind of like it's the effort is like a paper. I don't think it was easier in that sense. So
Yeah.
what is different is this is different from a regular invited editorial, which is more like a commentary, a non-peer reviewed commentary, which is someone comes together and says like, I'm giving you 5 pages in my journal, write something. That's not what
Yeah.
this is, like a column or something,
Yeah.
like an invited
Yeah.
column, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is different. And what annoys me that you now have to justify how it's different because
Yeah.
at face value, it looks the same, but I don't think it is the same.
So there's our special issue, but then there's the other thing I did with Shayla Miranda and Hani Safadi and Stefan Zeidel, where we talked about computationally intensive theory construction, right? Andrew's on that paper as well. So that's a straight out editorial.
Yeah.
We spent 6 months on it and went back and maybe more like 8 months. And we really dug into that and we were happy with the result. We sent it out to other editors. They gave us feedback. And as a matter of fact, I think you were one. You gave us feedback. Were you one?
I did. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember.
But there again, it wasn't double blind. It was quicker than are managing AI, and I think it's important. But there again, look, 4 or 5 editors of a top journal got together, got other editors to give them some quick feedback, and then published something where they're going to get citations, right? So that I think is someone could point to both of those examples that I was involved with and say, hey, that's precedent. Just because my journal's not as fancy, I can write editorials. Look at Arun Rai. He has that 2017 article that I love, that editorial, remember, where
Yeah.
what did he talked about the
Type
streetlight
3 errors.
effect and yeah, that one. That's the greatest editorial ever. And I'm sure he asked some people to get some feedback, and
I'm pretty sure he did. So I think there's two main
it's
differences.
his prerogative, right? He's editor in chief. He published it in MISQ.
So a couple of things. So first of all, I think there's two main differences. The first of these two is posture. Like, what is your intent? What are you doing? Yeah. So the editorial that we're involved in, or the editorial for the spatial issue, they were not written for like as a way to catch a wave on some trendy topic. Yeah, I do think so. That is not what this is. This is a very different. These were very deliberate strategic actions. Your editorial was part of a strategic plan, a 3-year plan for the journal, which also included the outlines of different editorials that would be published in that period. So there's a bit of a process there that people don't get to see. And also, you are, even if it's not going through a Scholar One official blinded peer review, people that do this with the right posture, they make sure they get some feedback on this thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a huge difference. Second, also some of the top journals, including MSQIs, etc., some of these papers, editorial issues and opinions, commentaries, they have the toughest review processes, man. I mean, this is tough. I'm involved in a commentary for the quarterly, and I swear to God, it's like the 5th round or whatever, and we're going nowhere. Yeah. And I've had issues and opinion papers rejected multiple times. Yeah. And I've been handling editors on these things. These are tough. These are not, they're not on invitation. They're not, cheap shots. I think these journals do a lot to make sure that these papers that everyone assumes to be a quick and dirty win or something like that, they actually, I think they're tougher than any other article.
Yeah. So I just got a commentary rejected at MIS Quarterly last year. And I'll tell you this, I think this is what happens. And I know I thought this way, but I think a lot of junior people look at the papers that it's like survivor bias or whatever, right? They look at the papers that made it through, and they look at the commentaries that made it through, and they think, oh, that's kind of lame. So they have two thoughts. One is, oh, that's kind of a lame commentary. They must have just let those guys in because they're senior people and they knew their names and whatever. Therefore, they gave them a pass and let them put in a shitty commentary. So that's one of the objections. The other thing that I see people when they see commentaries is that, oh, wow, that wasn't that impressive. I can do that too.
I can do that too.
They don't see for every commentary, there's like 100 commentaries rejected, right? And some, you could argue by some standard, are much better. Some, they don't see all the senior people rejected. The same one who got the commentary and was rejected 6 months before by the same editor, right? So they don't see all the rejections. They only see the outcome, and the outcome is usually something on the senior editor, because you can reject any commentary. So the senior editor must have seen something that, or the associate editor or whatever, must have seen something that they think should be published in the journal. Right?
Absolutely. And I do think there's a correlation with seniority, only for the fact that these people have seen more, they have usually more experience in the topic, and they are usually better writing just by the virtue of having written more, etc. So they're better. The better position to pull off such a difficult article where you don't have theoretical arguments, you don't have empirical arguments, you don't have methodological arguments. All you have is your argument itself. That's the toughest challenge in writing. So I want to give you one case study of this. So in 2010, it was ISR's 20th year anniversary. So in 2008, leading up to this, they had the very good idea of doing a 20th anniversary special issue where they only published a set of commentaries on the next generation, what's going to be the next big topics for the next 10 years. Now, I knew this because I was a first year PhD postdoc, and sure as hell I wanted to write something for that in 2008. So I did. And I can't remember, I don't think it got into even the review round. It was desk rejected. So, but I knew of this special issue, and I wanted to do something because I thought the idea was really cool. Failed miserably. Not the point. The point was then I was really eager to wait for the special issue to come out. And if you think about that 2010 special issue, Youngkin's digital innovation paper is there. Tilson digital
Yeah.
infrastructure is there. There's Mike
Yeah.
Myers' nomadic, like digital nomads thing in
Yeah.
there.
Amrit Tawana's
Amrit's paper
platform.
is in the platform
Yeah.
paper. This is a paper. This is a special issue where they really did publish 5 forward-looking commentaries that really did shape the field. And I looked
Yeah.
at them, and when I saw them come in, I was like, I was never thinking about any of these ideas. Like this is like, how did people
Yeah.
come up with this stuff? I was amazed.
Yeah.
So I think this is really
Yeah.
good case study on really powerful commentaries.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's a difference. So what we're getting at is and this is how you judge it, I think. In the end, you judge it on the substance. You read the commentary or the editorial, like Arun Rai's, 2017 editorial. It's pretty short. It's powerful as hell. I use it all the time. I use it with PhD students. I think through it. If people haven't read it, they should read it and memorize every word of that short editorial, right?
Yeah, he wrote a lot of good editorials, to be honest.
Yeah.
Arun did. Really good ones. It's difficult to do, by the way. Difficult to write good editorials.
I have no idea how well it's cited or anything, but if it is well cited, I would look at it and I would look at the substance of that editorial, and I would be like, "This is a solid work." And then I would look at some others, whether it's one of these kind of we talked about it, a clickbaity kind of article. We've talked about those in the past, or one of these kind of citation farm editorials, right? And just read it, right? And again, when you're hiring someone, when you're promoting them the first time, you probably just look at journal papers, how many they have. You read those, but it's about the substance of their journal papers. As they get more senior, and you're thinking of hiring them as a full professor or giving them a chair or, make it right, you'll look at citations. And I think you need to have an asterisk next to those without a lot of substance, because these senior folks may sometimes acquire a couple of papers that get really cited that maybe are a little bit of clickbaity or something like that. And, you maybe put a little asterisk next to those. These are not a substantive argument, but they got a lot of citations, and you maybe parcel those out, right? Parcel those out and just look at the other citations, make sure, right? So that's probably how we'll be evaluating. We have to, a couple that are maybe questionable, you have to partial out. Right.
So I am hearing two things. The first one is this good old, there's no shortcut. There is no shortcut. If you want to figure out how good a paper is, you'll have to sit down and read it. Like there's no other way. You can't, like all the proxies serve a purpose, and many of these purposes are first well intended, and they approximate. That's what a proxy does. But there's no way around it. A paper with 1,000 citations may or may not be good. It might probably be good, but maybe not. Yeah. A paper in a good journal may be good, but I hear too many students are saying like, why this? Well, it appeared in Management Science. It must be good. Well, why? So I do think that's a dangerous strategy to just rely on the indicators, and there's no shortcut, right? So that's the first thing you said. The other one that you said got me thinking about, should we indicate in our CVs which papers we want to be considered for their input and which ones not? Like how we like, so for example, on my webpage, I have like, these are my journal articles, and these are my non-reviewed editorials and commentaries. On the webpage, not on Google Scholar, I actually separate these two things. Like this has gone through peer review and these ones do not. So the managing AI is not a paper, but it's further down the list under this different category or something, right? At the same time, I don't think there's anything wrong with the citations of that particular paper, because I don't think it's clickbait. I think it's also a poster thing. Like you can't help it what people do with your paper, of course, if you're not citing it yourself, but others are. What are you going to do about it, right? So if you did it with the right poster and intent, I think that's just fair and square. We never wrote this paper to be clickbaity. We certainly didn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, remember we talked about it. We're like, AI is the biggest thing, and we need to create a basis for research in AI with this special issue. So we were really intentional about keeping about different genres. We wanted qualitative. We wanted a technical paper, and we that one didn't make it in. But we wanted different types of papers, so at least there's something for other papers to respond to in the IS field. That was
Well, not only
that was
that,
one
but
of our
also in
intentions.
the article itself, we wanted to
Yeah,
give a conceptual foundation that could be used going forward, not just in looking back.
yeah,
That's why we talked
yeah,
about these ever moving frontiers that keep on
right.
changing, keep on moving. And we thought
Yeah.
about some directions they could move forward, some of which came true, some of which did not, by the way. Let me flip this a little bit, right? In sort of moving towards the end. So I mentioned my friend Per, who hit 50,000 citations, all of which I think are legit. If he is on a clickbaity paper, it's not on the first page of his Google Scholar. All of them are just serious articles and a very, very good book that are, people that research entrepreneurship should read that
Well,
book.
except for his determinants of entrepreneurial intentions. I mean, that's probably substantive. It's 1995, but
It's 1995,
a
dude. That's what
workshop
people were
paper.
doing. He talked about the time, how you would do entrepreneurship research at the time and what data people had available. You didn't have you couldn't just survey startups for that one thing. Anyway, so what he does, or what he's done for a while, and I've seen him present, he has this presentation where he goes around, gives a seminar on writing, basically how to write an impactful paper. And what he does is he looks to his top 5 most cited papers, all of which have over 1,000, and he thinks about what success factors were involved. And he brings this down to a formula of 6 success factors. You want to hear them?
Yeah, absolutely. What are they? I got to take notes.
So the first one he says is just simply timing. Timing of a particular paper to appear at a particular time, just at the right point in time where that conversation is, is picking up or about to pick up or whatever, right? So that's just timing. So that you can influence a little bit, but some of that is out of your control. The second point that he says is it's a significant issue. Yeah, it's a significant problem for someone. Yeah, and he gives a couple of examples, about the social capital. This is when entrepreneurial incubator networks came up and people started to figure out how important social capital is for founders, etc. Knowing to know someone and so forth. So that's the second one, like how important is to issue and what is the issue. Some other ones that he wrote that are very influential are important theoretical issues. Conceptualizations of growth, conceptualization of opportunities. These were issues that people were grappling with, not practical people, but academics. So that's a second factor. The third factor, he says, is bloody hard work. You can't put it any other way. Bloody hard work through the review process, not being persistent, being prepared to get new data as part of the revision, not giving up, etc. He says there's not a single paper that, was an easy one, like that breezed through the review process. They're all bloody hard. Yeah. The fourth one that he mentions is having the right co-authors. Yeah. So, and when you look at, and he gives example, I think he has this one paper with Sheikh Hazara, who's a big name. He has Johan Wiklund, so he does have these particular papers all have I would always call it a strategically designed author team where really the experts on certain areas come together to write a paper about the intersection of these areas. And I would totally agree that really helps if you bring people that really know an area to come and work to apply that knowledge in another area where the other expert is. That's just a different ballgame. Remember we talked about Amrit and Hani writing a paper on atrophy? That's just a different quality just because these two brilliant people come together and, work out something together. I think that makes total sense as well.
So I'm looking at his stuff and a lot of it is bringing two things together. And I think he benefited from the kind of explosion of entrepreneurial research, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the timing. But what he did was brought two things together. He would bring entrepreneurship together with another big construct. So his biggest paper is, social capital and entrepreneurs. Right?
Exactly.
So boom, then his next one is dynamic capabilities and entrepreneur. It's a theory and review, like it's a review paper. Review papers get cited, plain and simple. If you can publish a review paper and you're the first on that topic or something, that's a citation machine.
Look at Dorothy Leitner's work on, her theory and review papers like culture and knowledge management. Yeah, exactly. They're huge. And it makes perfect sense because they become the one-stop shop for everyone interested in the topic, right? Because they summarize, review, and bring forward an entire, body of work over decades sometimes. Yeah.
Hey, speaking of which, and this is total change of topic, but at ISIS, like you and I are on that ISIS planning committee for Portugal, but they were talking about these theory and review track. So there's a
No, a
theory and
literature review
there's a
track.
literature review track this year at ISIS, right? I'm
Exactly.
curious.
And
Is this the first time it ever happened?
this is the first time, and I happened to come across it today. It's been run by Guy Paré from
Mm-hmm.
Montreal, who wrote a couple of, how to do literature review papers a couple of years ago. I remember that. Then there's Mary Tate from New Zealand, who's also like a literary person. And the third person, I forgot. Sorry, third person, I forgot. Anyway, so these are the three track chairs, and they're basically the literary review guys in our field. And I think it's an interesting one because, ISIS gets flooded with literature review papers. And if this means if you do a literature review, you have to send it to this track. So we end up with,
Mm-hmm.
4 sessions of literature review instead of 400. I'm all good with that.
Yeah, that's good. I wonder if it'll be like, I wonder if we'll get good submissions. So Guy Perret, Guido Schrinchen from
Oh,
Paderborn.
Grush. Yeah, so he's also a
Uh,
literary review guy. He wrote all of three of them have written papers on how to do different types of literature review. All three of them. Yeah.
uh, and Mary Tate. So yeah, I'm curious about that because the fact is, how I'm always bugging everyone about the cumulative tradition and you don't read enough and whatever. So a good lit review does that. It organizes the literature and helps create a foundation. Now you shouldn't take a literature review as an alternative to actually reading that stuff, but it's a good way to locate yourself, right? And understand what the big papers are. So I love lit reviews. They get really high cited. They're hard to publish. No one's going to like at MISQ, you need a theoretical contribution in addition to your lit review. And then too often people do those crappy structured lit reviews where uh, the research says this, the research says this, and it's silent on this. And they just kind of organize the research. It's like they don't, there's a trick, and this is what I think Dorothy was able to do on her reviews. The trick is,
What
to
it means.
conceptualize it and evaluate. Yeah, that's what she said. It's not just what it is, but what it means. And I think that's where so many of these lit reviews fall. They just almost do a counting exercise. This many are in this category, this many are in this category. Have a nice day, right? And the literature is silent on this other thing that I thought of. That's not the way Dorothy. Yeah, so if you're interested, you should listen to our Dorothy Leidner because we
Everyone
talked
should.
to her about this. Yeah, last
Yeah,
year.
I'll put a link in the show note. This is one of the best episodes we ever produced. Dorothy is brilliant in this. What has been done, what has been found, and what it means is just wonderful guidelines. Wonderful guidelines.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a little
So before
case
you
study
do
on that.
lit review, listen to that one.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. I have a little case study on the lit review and the connection to citation. So, and I think I told this story before. In 2016 or something, we did a theory review paper, and we started up by doing a pretty straight up literature review: who's done what, and what are the gaps, what's etc. And we wrote it up, and it was a really like a 40-page manuscript. And then we looked at it and said, like, this is never going to get published. So we basically discarded this and started afresh and wrote what eventually became a 2017 theory review paper, like a way to reconceptualize the body of work, what it means, and then, like outlining how to take it forward. That's in the quarterly. Then we said, well, this other review is kind of,
Representation theory.
yeah, exactly. The other review is kind of useful too, actually, right? It was just a straight up review, none of that theoretical integration stuff, but just a straight up review. And I said at the time, I think this is very useful. In fact, to some, it might be more useful. And anyway, so we did submit that after the other one got accepted. We did submit that to JS, and it also got published, a couple of years later. So we do have these two different versions of a review. One is a theory and review piece. The other one's a straight up literature review. And I said at the time, guess what, boys and girls? The straight up review will get more citations than the theory and review. Because I thought it's for a scholar wanting to do work in this area, that's just more useful. Oh, these people have done that. These people have done that. None of this reconceptualization stuff happening, right? And I was wrong. If you look at the citations for these papers, the quarterly theory review has twice as many as the other ones. Now, they're not skyrocketing in the thousands or anything, but I was wrong with my prediction about which type of review is apparently more, I don't know, more useful
but it's hard to
people.
But you're running into the issue of one's an MISQ, and that's more prestigious, right? So it's going to get more.
Yeah, it's maybe more
citations,
exclusive, but it's not like a world of difference. JS is a very respectable and highly respected journal,
Yeah.
And the review process was, this similar. They're both good processes and so forth. So yeah. So, by the way, final point. The final factor that Per always says, next to timing, significance of the issue, hard work, co-authors, the final thing is basically product market fit. So he calls it journal paper fit, like finding the right outlet with the right editors that give you basically the pathway into the journal. That's also important. So he tells the story that many of these top 5 papers that attract all these citations, they were, rejected at other journals first. Sometimes even desk rejected, and then they end up at the journals where they finally find a home. And I've certainly made the same experience that sometimes people, your paper gets rejected somewhere only to find a way to get published in a different journal. Like my eye repair paper, the recent one, that initially that was submitted to a special issue at JIT. I am so happy it got rejected there.
Oh, wow. That's funny. And then you get an MISQ. So, yeah, I think IS papers get this a bit when they try to publish outside of IS. Sometimes and I think entrepreneurship gets this a bit. They'll put a really influential paper in like Journal of Business Venturing, but it gets rejected at say SMJ or something. So
yeah.
All right, man. So what did we decide? Today we talked about citations, and I think we are to the point where there's no single metric. It can't just be journal papers because some top tier journal papers aren't that great, and some less prestigious outlets, they publish some awesome papers. Yeah. It can't just be citations because there are a lot of ways to game citations. All citations are not equal. In the end, you have to read the paper, but the problem is not all of us can read each other's papers because it's different genres, different backgrounds, everyone. So there's no single metric or single way to evaluate research, right? We just have to, you need all of it. You need a certain amount of citations. You need a certain amount of good top tier publications, and then you need
I think it's the same as with how we handle statistics these days in quantitative research, where basically now the guidelines is give as much context as you can, give us statistics, but give us more of them, and then leave the interpretation of the statistics up to the reader. Don't say something is important because of significance level. Don't say it's because of this. And don't just give us a p-value. Give us a whole bunch of things. Give us confidence intervals and betas and whatnot. Give us all of this, and then let people make up their own minds. And I think the same principle can apply here. Give me my number of A hits. Give me my citations. Give me my citations per paper. Give me the whatever the topics are of these papers, and then
have someone who knows, and this is why you have external letter writers. Have someone who knows my genre of research tell you about the quality of my research, right? And what I found with letter writers is there are 2 types of letter writers. Is this the same in Europe as the US? In the US, it's like you either get a positive or an extremely effusive positive, right? There's no negative. People will just say, yeah, this guy's good, solid work, like it, right? And if it's that, then it's an awful letter, right? No one's going to say this guy's work is shoddy and not rigorous, right? So instead they say solid work, he does a good job, right? So if it's like that level of positive, that's a negative letter. If you really believe in that, you have to say this is truly unique, exceptional, incredibly rigorous, well-trained, scholar, leading the field, is setting new course, right? You have to be over the top, I think, in the US for people to trust the external letter writer.
Well, so I've written letters for basically every continent on this planet. I do think they have more of an importance in the US, but you write letters here too, but I don't think they're as important, But so what I will say is this, like if I think very highly of a candidate for whatever they're up to, promotion, tenure, hiring, God knows, I am really thoughtful and working on the letter very carefully, and think of the right wording and probably be very, supportive, whatever. So I'm not just blurring down a page is what I'm saying. Like if it's a really good candidate, and I think it's important, then I really take care in writing that letter. And I think that's a good way. And also, I think you said that to me once. It's sort of like the point of the letter writer is to be supportive. You're not a peer reviewer here, not really, right? So you're supportive. And then, of course, you can put effort in because I think this effort is well spent. Not for you, of course, but for the person.
This person's career is in your hands.
People's lives depend on it. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, dude.
Yeah. This was fun.
This was fun. This went by quickly. Nick, as usual, a pleasure to talk with you. Talk to you next time.
All right, my brother. See you.